I knew I was in trouble when I saw 3 plastic flamingos could cause a woman to act like I'd burned down a community center. It started on a quiet Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee on my porch, admiring my freshly mowed lawn and the 3 bright pink flamingos I'd planted by the mailbox. My daughter had given them to me as a gag gift, and honestly, they made me smile every time I saw them. Then came the screech of tires and the unmistakable clack of cheap heels on pavement. "Mr. Nolan Edgewood, we need to talk." Now, there she was, Eloise Jenkins. The HOA president, self-declared neighborhood monarch and full-time buzzkill, mid-50s, permanent frown, and a haircut sharp enough to slice bread. She had a clipboard in one hand and a digital camera in the other. Great, I stood up. "Morning, Eloise. Don't morning me, those flamingos," she hissed the word like it personally offended her ancestors, "violate Section 5, Article 9 of the HOA guidelines. No plastic lawn ornaments. You were given a handbook when you moved in." "I read it," I replied, sipping my coffee. "Didn't see anything about flamingos being a federal offense." She snapped a photo. "You have 48 hours to remove them or face a formal violation notice. Refusal may result in escalating fines or," she paused for dramatic effect, "eviction proceedings." I stared at her. Eviction. Over lawn decor. "It's about maintaining standards, Mr. Edgewood. We don't want the neighborhood to look like a roadside carnival." I laughed. "You're kidding." Eloise didn't blink. "You'll hear from the board." 2 days later, I got the notice. A fine of $500, with the warning that further non-compliance could result in legal action including eviction. I couldn't believe it. I'd lived here peacefully for 6 years, paid my dues, kept my yard clean, and now I was being threatened over birds made of plastic. I went to the next HOA meeting, ready to speak my piece. Eloise was already seated at the head of the table, surrounded by her usual cronies: Roger with the tiny dog, Linda who peeked through her blinds like it paid a salary, and Curtis who never spoke unless Eloise told him to. I approached the mic. "I'm here about the flamingos." Eloise rolled her eyes. "We've discussed this. You're in violation." "I'm not removing them. They're harmless, and frankly this whole thing's ridiculous." "That's your choice," she said, "but the board has already voted. If the decor isn't gone in 24 hours, we will proceed with legal steps for eviction." The room went quiet. A few neighbors looked uncomfortable. Others avoided my gaze. Eloise just stared like she'd already won. I left the meeting boiling, but not scared. I wasn't about to let a plastic bird be the hill I died on, but I also wasn't moving it. I had another idea. The next morning, I made a few calls. One to a commercial realtor, another to my lawyer, and a third to the city's zoning office. See, what Eloise didn't know was that the HOA's office building, that tiny gray structure 2 blocks away, the lease was up. And the owner, an old buddy of mine from college, was looking to sell. 3 weeks and one well-timed cash offer later, I was the proud owner of 224 Sycamore Lane. The HOA's office. My office now, and guess what I planted out front, right where everyone could see 24 flamingos. Bright pink, solar-powered, spinning in the wind like a neon middle finger. Eloise nearly fainted when she drove by. I didn't expect Eloise to show up at my door the next day, but there she was, arms crossed, face pale, and jaw clenched so tight it looked like she was chewing a brick. "You bought the building?" she asked without so much as a greeting. "I did," I said, holding the doorframe casually with one hand. "Wasn't hard. Your lease expired at the end of last month. Guess nobody bothered to renew it." "That office belongs to the HOA," she snapped. "No," I said, "it belonged to Glenn Kessler. Now it belongs to me. I have the deed if you'd like to see it." "Would you like a printed copy or digital?" "I don't find any of this amusing." "Neither do I. Especially not the part where you threatened to evict me over a few pieces of plastic. That was excessive." She took a step forward. "We'll take legal action." "You're interfering with official HOA operations." "You're welcome to try," I replied. "But I've already sent a notice to vacate. You've got 15 business days to clear out. After that, I'll have the locks changed." She didn't say another word. Just turned and walked away, her heels digging into the sidewalk like she wanted to leave dents in it. By the end of the week, the flamingos had multiplied. I got a custom sign made that read, "Welcome to Flamingo HQ where lawn freedom lives." I wasn't subtle about it, and I didn't need to be. The neighborhood had started paying attention. 2 houses down, Mrs. Patel added a row of tiny garden gnomes with flamingo hats. Across the street, the Martins put up a wind spinner shaped like a pink bird. It was like someone flipped a switch suddenly. People realized they didn't have to be afraid of Alois anymore. Then came the real bombshell. My friend Alex, he's a property attorney who owes me more than one favor, started digging through the HOA's financial disclosures. What he found made my eyebrows nearly hit my hairline. "Look at this," he said, laying the spreadsheets on my dining table. "They've been collecting annual dues, but only about 60% of the funds are accounted for in operating costs. The rest is supposedly allocated for landscape improvements and community development, but there's no record of any contracts, no invoices, no permits pulled. And it gets better, Alois signed off on every single one of these transactions." I leaned over the papers. "You're saying they're siphoning money. Best case scenario, it's gross mismanagement. Worst case, it's embezzlement. We compiled the documents, cross-referenced them with city permits, and contacted 2 residents who'd served briefly on the board before resigning. One of them, a woman named Tasha, agreed to meet with me at the local diner. Alois hadn't scared her off, she'd just gotten tired of the politics. But when I asked about the landscaping funds, her eyes sharpened. She always handled those herself, Tasha said. Wouldn't let anyone else see the bids or choose vendors. Said she had trusted partners, but I never saw any of them. And the plants she claimed cost thousands. Half of them died within a month. Alex filed a formal complaint with the county auditor's office, and within a week, a financial investigator was assigned to the case. It wasn't long before the police got involved. An officer stopped by my house to ask for the documents we'd collected. The neighborhood was buzzing. People started knocking on my door, asking what was going on, and I told them the truth. I didn't embellish, just laid out the facts. That's all it took. At the next HOA meeting, which, I should mention, was now held in the community park with folding chairs and a borrowed megaphone, I showed up with copies of the financial records. I handed them out to everyone there. Alois tried to call the meeting to order, but nobody listened. Instead, someone stood up and read aloud one of the fake landscaping invoices from a company that didn't exist. "How do you explain this?" he asked Alois directly. She didn't answer. She just packed up her papers and walked away. Within days, the county issued subpoenas. Alois was forced to surrender the HOA's banking records. And wouldn't you know it, 3 of the listed vendors were tied to a shell company registered in her cousin's name. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. There was still work to do. While the legal process played out, the community held an emergency vote to remove the board. We needed 75% of homeowners to agree. We got 83. People who'd never bothered with meetings before were suddenly showing up with lawn chairs and thermoses of coffee. They were tired of being bullied over mailbox paint colors and holiday wreaths. A retired firefighter named Doug volunteered to help organize the transition. He'd lived here longer than anyone and had kept to himself for years. Turns out, he had a meticulous archive of every HOA notice ever sent to him, including one absurd violation for having a hose visible from the street during a drought. "We let them take too much control," he said. Time to take it back. By the time the county's audit was complete, Alois was facing charges for misappropriation of funds, wire fraud, and falsifying documents. Her cronies tried to distance themselves, but it was too late. Their signatures were on the approvals. Curtis, the silent one, ended up cutting a deal in exchange for evidence. Linda disappeared from the neighborhood completely. The new board voted unanimously to dissolve the old HOA charter and rewrite it from scratch. We brought in a neutral third-party management company with open books and quarterly public reports. No more secret spending. No more fines without hearings. No more threats. And the Flamingos, they stayed. Not just in front of my new office, but throughout the neighborhood. Someone even started selling little solar-powered ones online with the slogan, "Stand tall, stand pink." I never set out to be a folk hero. I just wanted to enjoy my lawn without being harassed. But sometimes, standing up for a little thing reveals a much bigger problem underneath. And when that happens, you've got two choices: roll over or roll up your sleeves. I rolled up my sleeves. The day the unsealed indictment hit the county records office, a quiet hush settled over Sycamore Ridge. Most people didn't know what racketeering looked like in a neighborhood with white fences and cul-de-sacs. But when Aloysius' name appeared on a federal charge sheet alongside two former board members, that changed. What had started with plastic flamingos had cracked open something deeper, something rotten that had been festering under artificial turf and overregulated flower beds for years. I was on my porch when Deputy Marshal Grant pulled into the neighborhood. Not a cruiser. A black SUV with government plates. He stepped out, adjusted his jacket, and looked around like he was taking mental measurements of the place. "You Nolan Edgewood?" he asked, walking up my driveway. "That's me." He handed me a folded document. "You're listed as a witness in the case. There's a pre-trial deposition scheduled in 3 weeks. It'll be sealed, but your testimony could be critical." "Didn't expect things to go this far," I said, unfolding the paper. "These types of small-scale rackets, they count on nobody looking too closely, but this one crossed a few lines. Wire fraud, mail fraud, falsified permit documentation. Someone got greedy." He paused, glancing over at the now abandoned HOA building, still proudly decorated with flamingos. "You the one who bought their office?" I nodded. He gave a short laugh. "Well, I've seen worse ways to start a revolution." After he left, I walked over to the old office. The place had been stripped bare, no furniture, no files, not even a paperclip, but I'd already installed new locks and a modest security system. Not to protect it, just to keep the record clean. Transparency mattered now. 2 days later, I got a knock from someone I didn't recognize. Tall guy, maybe early 60s, wearing a windbreaker from the City Planning Commission. He introduced himself as Dennis Romero. "I was on the zoning board when this subdivision was approved 22 years ago," he said. "I heard what's going on here, thought I'd stop by." "Appreciate the visit," I said. "You're welcome to come in." He stayed outside, glancing around at the homes. This neighborhood was supposed to be self-governing. Light oversight, no corporate management. But somewhere along the line, the original charter was amended without a public vote. That shouldn't have happened. My eyebrows raised. "You're saying the HOA's authority was never legally granted?" "Not in the way they wielded it. They filed a revision with the county clerk's office using a procedural loophole, claimed it was a clerical correction, but from what I've seen, it changed the enforcement powers dramatically." "That's convenient," I said. "Is it reversible?" "With a petition and a referendum vote, yes. If you want help drafting the paperwork, I can put you in touch with some people." I thanked him and got his card. The idea of not just replacing the board, but dismantling the very structure they'd hidden behind it planted a seed. Later that night, I sat down with Alex and Doug in my newly cleaned-out office. We spread out the original HOA charter along with the amended version Romero had dug up from county records. "Here," said Alex, pointing to a clause halfway down the page. "This line enforcement shall extend to all properties as defined in Addendum B." That's the kicker. There is no Addendum B. It was never filed. Doug leaned back, arms crossed, so every fine they issued under that clause could be nullified, Alex said, and potentially reimbursed. Doug let out a breath through his teeth. There's going to be a lot of angry people when they hear that, and angry they were. The next community meeting held in the church basement. Since we'd outgrown the park was standing room only. People brought folders, phone photos of letters, bank statements. One woman, Marcy from the far end of Alder Drive, brought a full binder labeled HOA Harassment, 2017-2023. I stood up front with a projector screen and walked them through the legal findings. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The documents did all the work. When I got to the part about the false addendum, the room buzzed like a kicked beehive. "I paid $1,000 in fines for trimming my tree too late in the season," someone shouted. "They charged me for pathway obstruction because my daughter's tricycle was in the driveway," another added. "We can't get that money back, can we?" asked an elderly man near the front. Alex stepped up. "In most cases, yes, especially if the fines were leveraged using a clause that was never legally adopted. We're working on a class action filing." If you'd like to be part of it, there's a sign-up sheet at the back. Doug took the stage next. He didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like someone who'd been burned and wasn't going to let it happen again. "We're not just cleaning house," he said. "We're building something better. No secret meetings, no power grabs, and absolutely no more weaponizing the rulebook." The crowd applauded, not politely loudly. It was the sound of people who'd remembered they had voices in the weeks that followed the class action suit gained traction. Over 100 residents signed on. Turns out, the HOA had a fondness for issuing fines near the end of each fiscal quarter. Almost like they were padding the books. That kind of pattern doesn't go unnoticed by auditors. Meanwhile, Eloise's trial date was set. The federal charges stuck. Her cousin, who operated the false vendor company, turned state's witness and provided detailed spreadsheets showing where the laundered money went: vacation rentals, luxury handbags, and a suspicious number of consulting fees paid to people who didn't exist. The judge denied bail. Curtis and Roger both accepted plea deals. They weren't masterminds, just enablers who looked the other way. Linda was nowhere to be found. Rumor had it she'd fled to Arizona. With the HOA effectively dismantled, we held an official community vote to replace the governance structure. We didn't call it an HOA anymore. It was now the Sycamore Ridge Neighborhood Council. Advisory only. No enforcement powers, just a place for residents to share concerns and organize block parties. You know what it should have been all along? I was elected chair, though I didn't campaign. Doug became treasurer. Marcy, the woman with the binder, volunteered as historian. We kept records open and meetings public. The Flamingos stayed planted and nobody said a word. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a note. "You were right to stand your ground. Sorry I didn't do it sooner." No signature, just that. I didn't need to know who sent it. I had a feeling it came from someone who used to sit on the sidelines, maybe even someone who'd voted with Eloise once. People change when you give them a reason to. That fall, the neighborhood threw its first harvest festival. No permits, no approval forms. We just closed off the cul-de-sac, set up tables, and let the kids run wild. Someone brought a grill. Someone else brought a bounce house. I set up a dozen flamingos in a ring around the street lamp and tied little LED lights around their necks. As the sun set and the music played, I looked around and saw something I hadn't seen in years: neighbors talking, laughing, relaxed. Not walking on eggshells, not peeking through blinds, free. All because someone drew a line over a bird made of plastic. Funny how freedom sometimes starts with the smallest things. A month after the Harvest Festival, something unexpected happened. A plain white envelope arrived at my office, no return address, just my name printed neatly in block letters. Inside were 7 pages of photocopied receipts and a typed letter. The receipts showed large cash withdrawals made from the HOA's operating account over a period of 6 years. The withdrawals weren't tied to any invoices, payroll, or community expenses. The letter was brief. It said the withdrawals were made biannually, always just before the board's budget reviews, and were authorized by an internal memo that had never been filed with the city. The memo was attached too, but it lacked any signatures. No names. Just a typed header, Board Discretionary Fund. I called Alex immediately. He met me at the office, took one look at the paperwork, and pulled out his phone. "This isn't just mismanagement," he said. "This is structured theft. Is it enough to reopen the financial side of the case? It's enough to expand it. If this memo held any legal weight, it would have been part of the charter amendments, but it's not filed anywhere. It's a ghost document." He contacted the county prosecutor's office that same afternoon. Within 72 hours, 2 forensic accountants were assigned to the case. They requested access to every HOA account going back 10 years. The old treasurer's computer, still in evidence, had encrypted logs that matched the dates on the receipts. That's when things escalated. The county prosecutor filed a motion to widen the scope of charges. What started as a small fraud case now included organized financial misconduct, illegal use of public trust funds, and conspiracy to conceal civil embezzlement. The judge approved a subpoena for all communications between former board members during their entire tenure. They found emails. Hundreds of them. Some were just petty complaints, Eloise griping about someone's porch paint or a neighbor's flag color. But others were worse. In one, she instructed Curtis to bury the landscaping receipts under maintenance codes. In another, she forwarded an estimate for a community bench installation, then removed the vendor name and tripled the amount on the final invoice. The worst was a string of messages between Eloise and a man named Stephen Gellard. His name hadn't come up before. Alex ran it through public records and found he was a contractor who'd been banned from city projects 5 years ago for falsifying labor costs. Yet there, he was receiving direct payments from the HOA's discretionary fund for beautification projects. The audit confirmed that none of those projects had ever been completed. The DA's office moved quickly. They charged Gellard with fraud and named him as a co-conspirator. He was arrested in his home in the next county over. During questioning, he admitted to forging invoices in exchange for a cut of the funds, always in cash, always handed off in person. The story hit the local news by the end of the week. Reporters showed up in vans. They camped outside the old HOA office, filming the flamingos spinning gently in the autumn wind. I refused interviews at first, but after the prosecutor called and asked if I'd be willing to speak at the upcoming community press conference, I agreed. The press conference was held on the courthouse steps. The district attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Natalie Breck, stood at the podium with Alex beside her. I stood off to the side until she waved me up. Mr. Edgewood, she said, was the first to question what others ignored. His persistence led us to uncover a pattern of criminal fraud that affected every homeowner in Sycamore Ridge. I took the mic, cleared my throat, and looked out at the crowd. This started because someone told me pink flamingos didn't belong in our neighborhood, I said. But what didn't belong was a system that let a handful of people control everyone else through fear and silence. This isn't about lawn decor, it's about accountability, and we've got it now. I stepped down. The crowd clapped, some cheered, a few people cried. By winter, the case had gone to trial. Eloise's attorney tried to argue that she had delegated financial responsibility to Gellard and Curtis, claiming she didn't know about the forged invoices. But the emails showed otherwise. She had approved every transaction. The judge wasn't swayed. The verdict came in before Christmas, guilty on all counts. Eloise was sentenced to 12 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for 6. Curtis and Gellard each received 5-year sentences, with restitution orders attached. The court ordered the sale of their personal assets to repay a portion of the stolen funds. Restitution checks started arriving in the spring. Small amounts, but symbolic. Each resident who had been fined illegally received a reimbursement. It wasn't just about the money, it was proof that what had been done to them wasn't just unfair. It was criminal. Meanwhile, the Sycamore Ridge Neighborhood Council thrived. Doug managed the finances like a man guarding a vault. Every dollar spent was voted on in public meetings. Marcy digitized all historical records and uploaded them to a public website. We even added a monthly newsletter with community updates written by a rotating group of volunteers, including high school students getting credit for civic service. One evening, I was walking home from a council meeting when I noticed a new addition to my office lawn. A child-sized pink flamingo hand-painted in bright colors with a little note stuck to its neck. "Thank you for making this place fun again." It was signed by 3 names, all kids from the neighborhood. I left it exactly where it was. Later that week, the council voted to designate the old HOA building as a community resource center. We cleared out the last remnants of the past and installed shelves with gardening tools, painting supplies, and foldable tables for events. We painted the inside walls white and let the local kids decorate them with murals. One wall showed a giant tree with names carved into it. Another had a cartoon map of the neighborhood. But my favorite was the one facing the windows. A mural of 20 flamingos, each one wearing sunglasses and holding a tiny protest sign. Their messages were simple: be kind, speak up, lawn freedom. And right in the center, one held a sign that read, "No bullies allowed." We never needed the old rules again. No one missed the thick handbooks or the threat letters. People mowed their lawns, helped their neighbors, and planted what they wanted. Some folks still didn't like lawn ornaments, but now they just kept it to themselves. The flamingos stayed, of course, not because they had to, but because they represented something more than decoration. They were a reminder that sometimes the smallest stand can shake the biggest walls, and that no matter how deep the rot goes, sunlight and a little pink plastic can still bring life back to the roots.